were all in all, and now I feel 10 feet tall. Sunny one so true. I love
Hey, Anderson, it's Jay. How are you?
Hey, Jay. Hey, everybody. Thank you all so much for hopping on here. We're going to get started in the next few minutes, but feel free to put your name and where you're coming from in the chat box for us. We always love to know wherever in North Carolina people are calling in from, and we're going to get started in probably the next 2 minutes, folks.
Hey, don't forget, you got an open invitation to the Cabarrus County Senior Dem meetings, which is the second Thursday of the month at 5:30.
I can't hear.
Mackenzie.
If folks will stay muted, at least for this portion of it, I know that the music is sort of
I can't hear anyone.
Miss Fran, we can hear you. Don't worry. I know that the music might be cutting in and out a little bit for folks. So we will promise to make sure that we cut that down when the speakers are speaking, but we want to make sure we give folks a little bit of intro music to everything. So if y'all can put your name and where you're coming into in the chat box, if you can see where that is, it should be on the bottom of your screen, on your Zoom screen, and it says chat. So you should be able to access it now. And we're getting everybody in from the waiting room possible. We had over 1,000 people that signed up to be on this call with us here tonight because we know that everybody is watching what's happening in North Carolina right now, y'all.
Hi, Anderson. This is Gloria. Slow.
I lose the volume.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
Again, we're going to get started in just a few minutes, folks. We got a lot of people we're getting in from the waiting room. Thank you to everyone joining us from across the state right now. We really, really appreciate it, especially to our CD1 folks that are out there right now.
There ain't no man can't save me. There ain't no man can enslave me. Ain't no man a man that can change the shape my soul is in. There ain't nobody here who can cause me pain, erase my fear, cause I got only love to share. If you're looking for truth, I'm proof, you'll find it there. You got to serve something, ain't that right? I know it gets dark, but there's always a light. You don't have to buy in to get into the club. Trade your worries. You gotta show up if you wanna be seen. If it matters to you more, it matters to me. I'm gonna fall hard, yeah, I know I am. When the clouds crack up, I laugh with them. There ain't no man can't save me. There ain't no man can enslave me. Ain't no man a man that can change the shape my soul is in. There ain't nobody here who can cause me pain, erase my fear, cause I got only love to share. If you're looking for truth, I'm proof, you'll find it there. You say you look funny, I say you're a star. I say you're whatever you...
All right, everybody, we are going to go ahead and get started. We still have folks that are coming in from the waiting room, but I just deeply appreciate all of the 600 of you that are currently on here right now. I know that we have more folks that are watching the live stream and that are also going to be rewatching this later. We're recording this and we're going to make sure that we're passing it around to folks across the state. Thank you all again for giving your time and your energy to the North Carolina Democratic Party here tonight. I know you could be doing anything else with your Tuesday, and we appreciate you being here with us. My name is Anderson Clayton. I'm the state party chair for the North Carolina Democratic Party. And as you all know, North Carolina has had a hellacious last 2 weeks with our Republican General Assembly targeting Black and brown representation in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina specifically, and trying to disenfranchise people across our state from free and fair elections, as they have continuously done throughout the history of North Carolina's electoral process. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is the pathway forward out of this. You all are going to hear from some phenomenal speakers who are going to talk about what we're doing right now actively on the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I pin myself so everybody can see me out there in Cyberland. How about that one? But making sure that folks are understanding what's happening on the ground right now, what the North Carolina Democratic Party is doing to push back, and also how our national partners have been helpful in being able to do that. So we've got folks on here tonight from the DCCC. We've also got former members of Congress and also a current member of Congress that's going to be joining us here. You all know that right now, North Carolina, last week, our state legislature came in and re-gerrymandered North Carolina took us from the 10-4 minority that we had in Congress, and is trying to strip away Congressman Don Davis's seat from NCO1 right now and take us to an 11-3 minority in Congress. This comes after we saw Texas Governor Greg Abbott, right after Donald Trump called him and said, I'd like you to disenfranchise 5 Democrats in Texas and re-gerrymander your state. And also seeing Gavin Newsom follow suit and say, well, Texas is not going to get away with that without the rest of the nation having a say-so about it. And here comes North Carolina and our Senate Majority Leader, Phil Berger, who called and made a phone call to the White House to Donald Trump and said, hey, I'll make that another congressional seat for the Republican Party if you'll endorse me in my primary right now that I've got going on in Rockingham County. We've got corruption at every level of politics right now in the state and also the nation. And here tonight on this call, I hope that you all will find a way to get involved and to put your fighting gloves back on and make sure that you feel like you're a part of what's going on in North Carolina and the pathway out of this. We have focused a lot on the Supreme Court elections in North Carolina for the reason that you all just heard. Gerrymandered races should not be legal in this state, and they are right now because we have a Republican Supreme Court that has backed up our state legislature and said that partisan and racial gerrymandering is legal in North Carolina. But when we had a Democratic Supreme Court before in 2022, that was not what they had said. Our Democratic state Supreme Court has said that partisan and racial gerrymandering was illegal. And we lost that Democratic state Supreme Court, unfortunately, in the 2022 election cycle. So when this new board came back in 2023, we knew that we had to make sure that there was a pathway out of gerrymandered races in North Carolina, and it focused on our state Supreme Court races. So we held a seat last year with Justice Allison Riggs by 734 votes out of 5.5 million cast in the state of North Carolina, thanks to many of you on this call. Shout out to my county party chairs, my precinct chairs, my volunteers who put those shoes on and they went out and they knocked doors and they canvassed their neighborhoods, because every bit of that mattered last year. And I know that we didn't see the national wins that we wanted, but North Carolina saw very good statewide wins, which led to the fact that Republicans felt like they needed to come in and deny election results in North Carolina, and also are fearful of the people, obviously, and the power that they have. And we're going to continue to push our Supreme Court with Justice Anita Earls' seat, another Democrat on the Supreme Court that will be up in 2026. And in 2028, the North Carolina Democratic Party has 3 Republican seats that will be up on the North Carolina State Supreme Court. And we're going to make sure that we take back power on our state Supreme Court to ensure that we repeal partisan and racial gerrymandering once and for all. You all are here tonight to understand the short game and how we're playing it, but also the long game in this state and how we're going to continue to fight for it. So I'm honored tonight that we have got our true fighter and our champion, the man of the hour, in my opinion, and folks that Republicans are trying to take out of Congress right now because they feel so threatened by the fact that Congressman Don Davis has stood up for Eastern North Carolinians who are having their healthcare access threatened right now, who are having their livelihoods threatened right now by Republicans in Congress. So thank you, Congressman Davis, for joining us tonight. I'm going to pass it over to you to address folks on the call.
All right. Well, let's give a big hand to our chair, to Anderson. Thank you so much for the leadership that you're providing our great state. And to each and every one of you, we are here. We're doing great. The family's doing amazing. And we are in this fight for the families across our state. It's that simple. My friends, let me be clear. I won this district, and this is also a district that President Trump won. And since the beginning of this year, we've had over 46,000, actually 46,616 constituents who've made messages, sent messages into our office. Now, just to let you know, constituents, which many of you are, don't hesitate to share what's on your minds. Over 46,000 messages. People have said, hey, we're interested in costs. We're concerned about our children, education, so many issues. And out of 46,000 plus messages that came into our office, not one, zero said we needed a new map. But my friends, we then saw the General Assembly assemble. And by the way, there were only 2 districts in Eastern North Carolina impacted, nearly 1.5 million people impacted in the East, and they hold the public hearing in Raleigh. It's no one in Raleigh that's in this congressional district. And then they opened a portal, and once they opened the portal, over 12,000 shared concerns, great concerns about this, and about 3 or so, a handful, supported this map. So we not only didn't hear any interest in drawing a new map, but we totally threw out any interest and concerns. But let me say to each and every one of you, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for what you're going to do, because with your help, we will win again in 2026. It's that simple. We can do it. We will do it with everyone that's here. That's why we're standing up to make sure that we can allow a pathway for families to see a doctor. That's why in all of these talks that's going on right now about food, and we're talking about kids not being able to eat. That's why we're in this fight. And so many have conveyed to me their concerns about cost, rising costs, raising kids with farmers, tariffs, so many concerns raised to me. This is why we're in this fight. Our seniors need Social Security. They need a permanent fix to Social Security to make sure it remains solvent. These are the things we've been hearing, we've been fighting for, and will continue to fight for. And we're in this with you. Thank you so much. Let's get ready to go. We're going to make this happen, and we're going to get it done. Thank you so much, and have a great night. Thank you for being with us tonight in this fight and in this journey.
Whoa. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for being on here and all that you were doing, even though we know that Republicans, again, tried to strategically target him right in his seat and have so. We still have a fighter in Congressman Don Davis who is still planning to run for his congressional seat and making sure that Eastern North Carolina has the representation that they deserve in Congress. So thank you, Congressman Davis, for being on here tonight. I know you are very busy and have to hop, but we really appreciate your time. I'm going to pass it over to my third vice chair, Elijah King, right now, one of the youngest members of our board, the youngest member of our board, if I'm not mistaken, and also somebody who is going to be able to talk you all through about the rally that we had last week and sort of the what we did leading up to the legislation that was passed in the state legislature. So Elijah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anderson. And thank you so much, Congressman Davis, for your absolutely amazing work representing Eastern North Carolina. And finally, thank you to the over 700 people that are here right now. Thank you for being here. It means so much that you took the time to show up, not only on this rainy Tuesday night, but like Anderson said, last week at that incredible rally, where many of you traveled across the state, hours and hours, to say no to Republican games. Your presence sent a message, a national message, that we're watching and we're not backing down. And I'll say this, while we still don't have a budget, thousands of North Carolinians stand to lose healthcare, food benefits, and more, all because Republicans care more about political wins than people's lives. I'll offer this quick story. When I started college at UNC Greensboro in 2020, Guilford County was already carved up after a result of map redraw, split into 3 different congressional districts. Congresswoman Kathy Manning fought hard to represent us, but when Republicans redrew the map, she chose not to run again in 2023. That's what gerrymandering does. It steals powers from voters and silences communities. So as we look ahead to next year's elections, we need to keep the Republicans accountable, keep organizing, keep supporting our amazing legislators who are fighting the good fight every single day in the halls of the legislature. Let's make sure we're channeling that same energy we brought last week to Raleigh, straight to voters' doors, on the phones, and in every single corner of the state, because when we organize, when we show up, when we choose to do something about it, we win. So thank you. Thank you. And thank you again for your absolutely amazing work. Thank you for showing up. Thank you to our volunteers. Thank you to our state, our county chairs, our precinct chairs, and everyone in between. And now I'm going to introduce Paige Anderholm, the DCCC Deputy Voter Protection Director, to help us understand what's happening with redistricting nationally and where we fit into that picture here in our great state of North Carolina. Thank you, and thank you again.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Elijah. I am Paige Anderholm, the Deputy Voter Protection Director here at the DCCC, also historically a North Carolina voter. So really excited to be here speaking to y'all, though sorry we're not celebrating quite yet, though I anticipate we will be back together in the spring doing just that. So as you all know far too well, there's a lot of changes going on across every congressional district in the country right now. You know, even at the start of the cycle, there were some states with typical ongoing redistricting litigation. That's states like Florida, Georgia, North Carolina actually still had redistricting litigation ongoing from 23, Texas, Utah, and Wisconsin, right? So at the D-Trip, we were always prepared for changes to our battlefield and to support our members in these moments. And as I'm sure you've heard, there's also within that bucket 2 redistricting cases before SCOTUS, before the US Supreme Court right now, with potential for national impact. That's Alabama, although the Supreme Court hasn't accepted the state's appeal yet, and we're watching that. But more well-known right now is Louisiana. Both of these lawsuits use Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to fight for fair maps, where last cycle, Black voters were finally able to elect candidates of their choice successfully. States have now taken these maps back to the Supreme Court because they were tired of that fair representation finally after one cycle. You know, in Louisiana, additional argument was reheard this past month. And now we're waiting for that decision. Landmark decisions like the one we're expecting in Louisiana usually come in June, although the state has requested a decision within, you know, the next month or two. And ultimately, the timing of this decision will determine its impact on the midterms, but it's something we are preparing for. But now with all of that in mind and the general, more typical redistricting litigation and movement we were expecting, want to get to why we're all here tonight, right? The Trump administration, frankly, is attempting to rig the midterms before a single ballot is cast by weaponizing redistricting. Of the many different states you hear about in the news currently, there are 3 states where Republicans have capitulated to Trump and passed maps. That's Texas, really kicked us all off, really strong there. As Anderson mentioned, 5 seats are at play there. Missouri, and then North Carolina. As you all know, North Carolina is no stranger to gerrymandering, right? I am a longtime constituent of North Carolina 5. So that means my representative has never held a town hall because she is, you know, deeply entrenched in her district. And this map that was passed just last week, in less than 2 days, is the 5th map that this state has seen as in many years. And instead of fighting for working families, North Carolina Republicans want to further rig the game, right? So they're not accountable to voters like yourself. They know their policies hurt us, and they're doing everything they can to insulate themselves from our power ahead of the midterms. I'm going to let Kat Lawson handle the ins and outs of the ongoing litigation here in North Carolina. But before I hand it off to her, I want to say three things. One, know that the D-Trip is using every tool at our disposal to take on these Republican power grabs, and Democrats across the country are pursuing every opportunity to respond. Two, later tonight, I won't steal anyone's thunder, but I know y'all are going to be talking about how you can help in this fight, and going to be so honest with you. This summer, when my dad asked how he could support me and the fight for the house, I honestly told him he should become a monthly donor. So don't underestimate the power that comes from supporting these folks. And then my final thing was that I get emotional when I think about how far the state party's come. And just want to say thank you. And I didn't beat myself to that. So really appreciate it. And I'm going to leave you in the trusty hands of Kat Lawson, your voter protection director. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paige. All right, y'all. So I'm going to talk about kind of what the state of play is, what the current reality is, and where we go from here. We're going to step backwards a little bit in order to understand kind of what's been going on. So as you know, Paige just talked about the national fight, right? We have Democrats all over the country trying to fight against Republicans' determination to give Donald Trump more power than he has ever earned and than he ever needs in order to continue to hurt people all across our country. But that is not new to North Carolina, right? We have been ground zero for voter suppression for a lot of these strong arm tactics for a long time. So we have had multiple maps over the last several years. We have had the theories about election denialism and conspiracy theories. We have had zombie lawsuits and attempts to kick voters off the voter rolls. And we have had power grabs to take power away from democratically elected governors, for example, to give them over to the Republican auditor. So we know what it means to have to stand up and fight the long game here. So for maps specifically, we know that this is an attempt to manipulate the outcomes of elections. Gerrymandering is done so that elected politicians don't have to actually compete with each other and compete for votes to the public. Now, I'm going to talk about the more recent past, but it would be ridiculous for us to not acknowledge the fact that in the South in particular, gerrymandering was used to and is used to disenfranchise Black voters and to limit Black power. And so this is something that we have long history with, and we're going to hear from some folks who have been champions of this fight for much longer than many of us on this call have been. And so to those of you who have been part of this fight for ages, thank you for continuing to be here. And so with that history in mind, right, that long-term history of our state, let's talk about some of the recent history that got us to this point. So we're going to start in the 1990s. And the reason we're going to go decade by decade and do just a quick touch point on all of them is because every 10 years, we have to draw new maps. Because every 10 years, we have a census and we recount how many people there are in each state around the country, and we figure out how many seats in Congress every single state gets. So in the 1990s, right, North Carolina was still subject to something called pre-clearance. That meant that it had been found, as a matter of law and fact, that North Carolina had racially discriminated in its maps before. And so its new maps had to get approved by the DOJ in order to make sure that it was not continuing to harm voters. Despite that pre-clearance, they still managed to draw maps that did. The 1990s was also when we saw the constitutional amendment voted on by North Carolinians to take the governor out of the process of drawing maps, which is why Governor Stein was not able to veto this map. That was a decision that was made back then. Moving forward, right, as we get into the 2000s, we kind of have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Democrats started using partisanship as a reason to justify gerrymandered districts. And this was something that we have to be honest about and accountable for. And the fact that in the 2000s, there were multiple attempts and individual members of the General Assembly who proposed changes to redistricting so that it would be independent. And those attempts didn't win. But what Democrats used in order to try to increase minority representation and to increase minority power and to rectify the sins of the past, that tool ended up being used by Republicans as a weapon as we moved into the 2010s. So you all might remember that in the 2010s was when the Republicans took control over the General Assembly, and they won the majority in the House and in the Senate. Lillian, if you will bump us ahead to the 2010 slide. And so when we got there, right, that meant that now Republicans got a chance to draw the maps for the first time in a while. And so what they decided to do for that is they drew map after map after map that kept getting struck down in the courts because they were racial gerrymanders. And the language that came out of these cases really demonstrated just how strategic and how targeted those maps were. They were targeted with surgical precision to remove Black voters from districts where they had an opportunity to elect their candidates of choice, and in order to limit that voting power. And so in 2016 was when Republicans first figured out that they could create a map in which there was going to be 10 Republicans and only 3 Democrats. And then the Supreme Court decided that it was going to allow racial gerrymandering. But we get 2 bites, right, at constitutional claims. We have the US Supreme Court, which applies the US Constitution, and they said, in my opinion wrongly, the partisan gerrymandering was okay. Our Democratic majority on our state Supreme Court gets to apply the North Carolina Constitution. And our Democratic majority said, you know what? We don't care about whether or not the US Constitution is being appropriately interpreted. Our responsibility is to interpret the North Carolina Constitution. And that says that it is unconstitutional to use partisanship to gerrymander maps, to draw maps that limit the people's power in order to maintain power in the folks who already have it. And so then we hit the one after the other fights that we've been having for the last 5 years. So 2020, our Democratic justices said you can't use partisanship to gerrymandering. In 2021, the partisan map that the Republicans had drawn was struck down, and there was a requirement that a new balanced map was created. In 2022, that map is what was used for elections, and we got 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats elected around North Carolina. Right? Those were competitive races, those were competitive seats, and voters got a real choice about who they wanted to represent them. And look, do we want a world in which Democrats get to win all the seats? Yes. But we want that world because we have earned people's trust, because we have earned the right to have that power, not because we are rigging the game along the way. The downside and the real bad thing that happened in 2022, we lost our Democratic majority on our state Supreme Court, and the consequences came immediately. The very next year, in 2023, the Republican majority on our state Supreme Court decided to revisit that 2-year-old decision about partisan gerrymandering and change their mind. And so the Republican majority then said, actually, we're changing our mind about that 2-year-old decision. You can use partisanship to gerrymander. That's completely acceptable. And so because they decided that, because we lost our state Supreme Court and we lost that protection of the law and of good, fair-minded judges, we then got new maps that were drawn to favor Republicans and to privilege partisanship in our maps. A lawsuit got filed against that, and we had the lawsuit going on in 2023. And then we got to 2024 and we had a whole new election. And under that 2023 map, that map that is currently under a lawsuit, 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats are elected to the House. So just think about that. In 2 years, we went from a 7-7 equal representation to a 10-4 split. And that happened not because there was a mass shift, right, in North Carolina. North Carolina, yes, went for Donald Trump in 2024. It also went for Josh Stein. It also went for Jeff Jackson. It also went for Allison Riggs. Right? We are not a state that fits easily into those boxes. And so what we now have, though, is the Republicans deciding that rigging the game like that wasn't good enough. They had to do it again. And they didn't even have to do it for themselves. They decided to do it for one man, Donald Trump. And they decided that they were going to throw over any sense that it is their job to take care of the voters of North Carolina in order to give one man more power. And so none of this is normal. So when you hear people say, oh, Democrats have gerrymandered in the past, I want you to remember this and say, no, this is not the same thing that we have done, right? This is not the same tools. These are not the same impacts. Instead, what we have was the current map, well, the 2024 map that was used, which you can see right here. So that blue up in the northeast corner of our state, that was Representative Davis's seat. That is what it looked like. This is the historic Black Belt in North Carolina. This has been an area that has been a front line for many, many fights and victories for civil rights that protected voters not only in North Carolina, but all over the country. And this was also the district that elected the first Black North Carolina congressperson in nearly 100 years when it elected Ava Clayton. So this district is special. You're going to hear more about that from a man who knows it better than any of us ever could. But now we have this new map. And watch how that blue changes. That change, what that means is there are tens of thousands of voters who used to be represented by Don Davis, who are now going to be represented by Greg Murphy. And those are voters who are no longer going to get a chance to vote for Don Davis again, even though they have voted for him before. And so this change, right, is the partisan move. And the fact of the matter is, you can see all those little numbers on this map and those different colors. Those are the other congressional seats in North Carolina. Republicans could have chosen to attack a different Democratic seat. They didn't want to, because doing that would force them to make other Republican seats more competitive. And they're not willing to make their seats competitive because they are trying to not compete. And so we are going to have to prove to them that this whole change is not worth it. But to give you a sense of the uphill battle we are facing and why it is so necessary that we fight, both leading up to an election and all year, every year, this is cheating. And I want you to understand why this is cheating. So the former map, right? You heard Representative Davis. His seat is a plus Trump seat. He has a lot of Republican voters, and he still won. He still got elected because he has earned their trust and he earned that representation. Republicans have now made it where instead of a average extra support of +3 for Trump, it is now a +11 for Trump, for Republican-leaning voters. These decisions were made and they were targeted against Representative Davis, against this particular district, and it is something that has to be fought and has to be stopped, not only for this cycle, but North Carolinians deserve better in the long term. And so here's how we make that fight. So you've already heard from Paige about the short-term impact, right? We have lawsuits. We're going to do litigation. And so the 2023 lawsuit has been added to. So again, Republicans were already standing in front of courts having to explain why they weren't racially gerrymandering and illegally gerrymandering in the 2023 map. Now they're going to have the exact same fight about the 2025 map. So this lawsuit is going to continue on and point out that these changes, you can call it partisanship all you want. The fact is you disempowered Black voters. The Republicans chose the racist approach to maintain their power. And that is something that they need to be held accountable for, and that's what those lawsuits are about. But we aren't going to only be fighting this in courts. We're going to fight this in elections. So first up, we have got to win back our Supreme Court. You saw that it took a 2-year span of time for the Republicans on our Supreme Court to change their mind and to take back the protections afforded to North Carolina voters by the North Carolina Constitution. That is only going to change once we take back those seats on our state Supreme Court. So we are going to win Justice Anita Earle's seat this coming year in 2026, and then we are going to flip that court in 2028 and make sure that our laws are actually interpreted fairly, that our Constitution protects people's rights instead of it being just thrown out in order for the General Assembly to get whatever it wants on any given day. The other thing we have to do, and we have to own, and I'm so proud of our House Democrats for doing this, North Carolinians deserve free and independent districting, right? This isn't something that people in power should get to decide about themselves, about how they keep it. And there is now in the House 39 Democrats have already signed on to an independent districting amendment that should go to the North Carolina voters. At the end of the day, North Carolina voters should be able to decide who represents them and how that representation is decided. And y'all, if we're going to be the Democratic Party of the New South, this is what it means. It means that we pass the things that are right and that we protect and keep power where it belongs, which is with the people. And so we are lucky to have leadership like that. And in order to get them in power, keep them in power, earn the trust of other folks, we're going to need y'all to hit the streets and take up some calls to action. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over so that you can hear about what we're going to be doing here And Anderson, I think you come up next and you're going to introduce somebody who's going to give us more history here.
Yeah. I hope that you all, the North Carolina Democratic Party is one of the luckiest state parties, I think, in the country, because we have got Kat Lawson fighting for us each and every day as our voter protection director. Kat has been on the ground working with all 100 county boards of elections, the Democrats that are on them right now, trying to make sure that they're pushing back against extreme Republican policies at the local level too. So a big thank you to any of my board elections or my precinct judges or folks like this on that or like that on this call tonight. I deeply appreciate the work that you all are doing too to uphold democracy in your backyard. And thank you, Kat, for the work that you're doing each and every day for the NCDP. She's right though, because I know that some of y'all are like, y'all are talking a lot at us, and I get that. But I want y'all to understand the plans for lawsuits, the plans for long-term goals, but I also want y'all to understand the history, because right now people are looking, and the nation, right, is looking at what the South is going through. And honestly, the nation is having to experience what, in my opinion, the South has been going through now that we have got a Trump presidency part 2. And what that's looked like is him coming in and destroying institutions. What it's looked like is him coming in and targeting Black and brown voters. And the South has been experiencing that for the last 45 years and the 45 years before that. And I can't think of anybody better to tell you all about the history of this congressional district and the Black Belt of Eastern North Carolina than our former Congressman G.K. Butterfield, everybody. A man from Wilson, North Carolina, and also a proud Eagle grad. So if I've got any NCCU folks on here tonight, make sure you put that in the comment. Go Eagle Pride. But thank you, Congressman, for being on here tonight and to give a little bit and lean a little bit into the history of this congressional district with us and why it is so important to protect it.
Thank you so much, Anderson, and it's good to see all of you tonight, and thank you so much for joining this very important conversation. Anderson, I want to say publicly that I know of no better party chair in the last 50 years that I've been a part of the Democratic Party than you. The party is in good hands, and you have shown extraordinary leadership. And I just want to publicly thank you for all that you have done for the party. To the party leaders, many of you are on the call, and I know many of you, but most importantly, to my Democratic friends from far and wide who have joined the call tonight, thank you for having an interest in this conversation. You know, the conversation that we're having tonight is about voting rights, not just voting rights for Democrats, but voting rights for African Americans. Let's talk for a few minutes, if we can, about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I just want to commend Kat Lawson's presentation just a few moments ago. It was spot on. I have listened to a lot of presentations on the Voting Rights Act and voting in North Carolina, and it is just an exceptional presentation. So thank you, Kat, for your leadership within our party. What Kat did not mention is that the 3 seats that we lost in North Carolina as a result of the Supreme Court decision and the manipulation of the Republican legislature, those 3 seats that we lost, Kathy Manning and Wiley Nickel and Jeff Jackson up in Charlotte, those 3 seats cost us control of the U.S. House of Representatives. Had it not been for that, Democrats would be in the majority in the House, and Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House. And so I want to talk just a moment about the Voting Rights Act. This is not a political speech tonight on my part. I just want to give you some facts, some historical facts, if I can. In 1965, we had a literacy test in North Carolina. You had to be able to read and write and satisfy a registrar before you could become registered to vote. And because of that, African American voter registration was very, very low. Even African Americans who were literate were fearful of having to take the test, to go to the courthouse and expose themselves to this thing called a literacy test. Also in 1965, election systems were rigged, at-large voting in multi-member legislative districts and all of that. And to compound the problem, we also had and continue to have polarized voting. What does that mean? Polarized voting means that there are white voters who refuse, because of race, who refuse to vote for a candidate who is preferred by the African American community. We call it polarized voting. And so because of these impediments, the Congress back in 1965 passed a Voting Rights Act. In the Voting Rights Act, there were many different provisions. One provision was the elimination of the literacy test. That was good. It also implemented a Section 5, which said that any, 40 counties in North Carolina were put under Section 5, and the law said that before the counties could change anything that related to voting, it had to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice. It also said that any redistricting maps had to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice. But there was also a Section 2. Section 2 gave individual plaintiffs the right to bring a lawsuit if they felt that their vote was being diluted and have their day in court. And so elimination of the literacy test, Section 5 preclearance, and Section 2 was the right to bring a lawsuit. And because of that, in 1990, after the census, a Republican Justice Department, yes, a Republican Justice Department insisted that North Carolina create 2 majority-minority districts in North Carolina, one in the Greensboro, Charlotte area, and the other in eastern North Carolina. And that was very significant. And the legislature created districts 1 and 12. And so as the years went on, and Kat did a good job in explaining that to you, as the years went on and Republicans became the majority in our legislature, we began to see political gerrymandering. We began to see racial gerrymandering, and the numbers began to dwindle. But as time went on, the courts ruled in our favor several times, and we were on the offensive, and we were getting our political traction as we deserved. But then we got a surprise in 2013. The U.S. Supreme Court said that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, that's the pre-clearance part, Section 5 could no longer be enforced. That was a big setback. And then a few years later, the U.S. Supreme Court said that that political gerrymandering was okay. It said that federal courts have no authority to tell the states that they cannot politically gerrymander. But in that Supreme Court decision, it said that maybe state courts might have jurisdiction, but federal courts do not. And so that's when North Carolina courts started looking at political gerrymandering. And our Supreme Court, we had a Democratic majority at the time, and they interpreted the law properly. Our North Carolina Supreme Court said political gerrymandering was in violation of the state constitution. 2 years later, the Republican Supreme Court reversed it. And so we've had a dismantling of Section 5 and now a realignment of political gerrymandering. Now we turn to the Voting Rights Act. I talked about political gerrymandering, which is not the Voting Rights Act, but the Voting Rights Act is now on life support. Yes, we lost Section 5 back in 2013, but now because of a case down in Louisiana, the courts may in the next few weeks take down Section 2. As a remedy for African American voters to address in federal court. And so what this is all about, and I'm going to close now, but what this is all about is that in Congress right now, there are 222, or at least in the House, 222 Republicans, 213 Democrats. It takes 218 votes to control the House. And so the midterm elections are about getting to 218. And so we have a concerted effort all across the country, targeting districts that we think we can win. And we're trying to flip some seats that are red. We're trying to get beyond 218. And we have a path forward. And the Republicans know that we have a path forward. And so they've decided, the opposition has decided to do something extraordinary. It's called mid-decade redistricting. They've decided to immediately redistrict in certain states. Texas was the first. The Texas came up with a plan to eliminate 4 Democratic seats. And then after that, Missouri came along and eliminated 1. And North Carolina has now eliminated 1. And Indiana may soon be eliminating 1. And so in response to that, California said, we're not going to let you do this. We're going to pass a referendum would allow us to put 4 Democratic seats back on the field. Virginia on tomorrow, I want you to watch the news on tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Virginia legislature is going to be coming up with legislation to redraw their map as well. The governor of Maryland has said they may do it in Maryland, and the governor of Illinois may do it there. So the eyes of the nation are on North Carolina. We have 14 members of the delegation. Right now, we have 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. And if this map is allowed to stand, it will go to 11 Republicans out of 14. What they've done is to take Wilson, Greene, Wayne, and Lenoir counties and move them to the 3rd district. Over in the 3rd district, they've moved Beaufort, Carteret, Craven, Dare, Hyde, and Pamlico counties over to the 1st district. And what does that mean? It means that 170,000 African Americans in NCO1 in the 1st district have been disenfranchised. District 1 now, Don Davis's district now has 25 counties. And the Black voting age population has been reduced from 40, it was already on the margins, but it has now been reduced from 40% to 32%, which means that Don Davis finds himself in a very, very difficult position. And so we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to fight in court, and we're going to have to get out to vote like we've never voted before. And so Democrats, we have a challenge in front of us, but I think we are ready for the challenge, and let's get it done. Thank you so much for letting me join you tonight.
Thank you, Congressman, for joining us and for fighting the fight that you have for so long in Congress, and also continuing to fight it with us right now. We deeply appreciate it. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to my first vice chair, Jonah Garson, who's going to walk you all through, besides the legal action that the state party and the DCCC and the DNC have already filed against this suit, what are we going to be doing on the ground right now throughout North Carolina to make sure that we are pushing back against extremism in our local communities and also at a state level in North Carolina? Jonah, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Clayton. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. So a lot of folks in the chat have been sharing ideas for concrete calls to action. We need you all to be fully read in on and part of our plan as a state Democratic Party from how we get from here to there in taking back our state Supreme Court, which is our only path forward out of this mess to unrigging democracy in North Carolina. Not only do you all need to know this plan backwards and forwards, but we need you to be able to teach this plan. And so a lot of what you hear from us and a lot of what we are going to ask you to do is going to be a lot of education of activists and of voters. Both of those things. And we need you there with us, okay? So I'm going to give some concrete calls to action this evening that fall into a number of different buckets. For every concrete call to action, I'm going to explain why it links up to our objective number 1, which is to take back our North Carolina Supreme Court so we can unrig our maps once again, okay? Sound good? Thumbs up? All right. So number 1, I would be remiss if I didn't start by just reminding folks that we have critical local elections up next week in 91 counties across this enormous, most populous state of ours. Those local elections are critical to all of our other electoral goals, including the big electoral goal of electing Anita Earls in 2026, right alongside Roy Cooper, okay? That's number 1, okay? We care as NC Dems about these local races because number 1, at a time when federal GOP leadership is craven and corrupt and incompetent, at a time when state GOP leadership is craven and corrupt and incompetent, it is our local leaders who will be charged with keeping communities safe and moving forward with the resources they have on hand. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, building the bench. You all know what that means. But number 3, when we talk to voters, when we connect with voters at their doors or over the phone about local issues that matter most in their lives, we are creating folks who are engaged in democracy, folks who will show up for our courts, for our elections, up and down the ballot. Okay, so for this final push, I'm asking you all to take a leap of faith with us, even if you have never ever canvassed before, or certainly have not been involved in a local race. I need you all to get involved, and in particular, think about joining us in canvassing in this last week, talking to voters about local issues right where you are. Chances are you're close to one of those 91 out of 100 counties that has local races up, or going to one of our most competitive races where we're trying to flip a city council, or we're trying to particularly seed the ground for the electoral results we need with our huge top of ticket US Senate race next year and our huge top of ticket North Carolina Supreme Court race next year. All right, capiche? All right. The second thing is know the plan backwards and forwards. This is a little bit about just civic education and really internalizing what we're saying here. This conversation on this Zoom has moved a mile a minute because we have so much information to share with you all, okay? And we care about sharing that information. But if there is one place where you all should slow down and join with us in slowing down, it's right here as we focus on the plan. In order to unrig our maps, we must take back our North Carolina Supreme Court. That is the route forward in North Carolina. Okay, we must flip our North Carolina Supreme Court by 2028. We are here. We have just won a huge pitched battle to make sure that Justice Allison Riggs was able to retain her seat. We won that through work in the field, through a lot of door knocking, and $2.2 million in litigation fees that we largely had to raise ourselves as a state party. Okay, we won that in the courts, we won that in the field. It was bruising, and at the end of the day, this party, the people on this Zoom, we made it happen. Okay, we are getting ready for 2026, where we have Justice Allison Riggs's former boss and mentor, Justice Anita Earls, as the top of our ticket. We must reelect her to the state Supreme Court. Justice Anita Earls founded the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. She hired Justice Allison Riggs out of law school, and they worked together building the South's most powerful, important voting rights organization. Justice Anita Earls will be running likely right alongside Governor Roy Cooper, and it's going to be up to all of us to explain why her race is top of ticket and not to let anyone breathe the name Roy Cooper without saying her name, Justice Anita Earls. In 2028, after we have elected Justice Anita Earls, we must flip 3 Republican North Carolina State Supreme Court seats that all come up at the same time. Okay, so that is step 3. Step 1 completed, check mark, success, electing Justice Allison Riggs. Step 2, we must reelect Justice Anita Earls. Step 3, in 2028, we flip 3. And that way we get a Democratic majority who can then once again say immediately, partisan gerrymandering, which, oh, by the way, is just racial gerrymandering by proxy, is unconstitutional under our state constitution. Okay? So that is the 3-step plan. And in doing that, we unrig democracy and we make possible in this state a whole bunch of other electoral outcomes for Democrats, not to mention all the substantive policy outcomes when it comes to public education and personal rights and our environment, all right? Okay, so call to action number 2 was about you knowing that plan backwards and forwards. You might be saying, okay, I think I got it. And you've said it enough at this point. What is the takeaway? How can I share this with other folks? We have made a print-ready version of this plan that can go right onto folks' refrigerators. And ncdp.org/print, if you go there, you will see the 3-step plan and you can share that with everyone. And please, please, please consider printing it off yourself, because we will ask you to refer to this plan over and over and over again over the next few years, okay? All right, so know the plan. Number 3, okay, you might say, we have the plan. Now, how do we involve ourselves in the plan? We are going to be asking folks to do work where they're at for the goal of flipping our courts. And you will hear about that on our November 16th launch of our judicial campaign. All right. We need you to attend on November 16th. Yes, I'm referring you to another Zoom. No, there was absolutely no way we could get all of this in one Zoom. November 6th, we're going to be joined by all of our judicial candidates, and we are going to go step by step for what you need to do to get ready for January and December. Okay. So Sunday, November 16th on Zoom, the sign up is in the chat. We need you there. That's step 3. If you have a planner, mark that date right now. Okay. Next, to get started, there is an amazing organization in this state that is not part of the Democratic Party called Flip NC. Flip NC is run by some amazing and very smart people from whom we take a great deal of inspiration in our judicial work, okay? And they will be doing a canvas for our courts on Sunday, November 9th at 1:30 p.m., right after the local elections. If you want to take what you've learned today and immediately turn it into action, and you cannot wait till November 16th, please consider signing up with our friends with Flip NC and their canvas for the courts, okay? That's something for those of you who are sitting on your hands and need to do something now. All right, next. All right, then what we also need you all to consider doing is joining us as a recurring donor. All right, a lot of you all are like, I came here for action. I could do myself. I already donate quite a bit to candidates. Well, I am going to urge you, and I think every one of us who has been involved here in party leadership and in the project of rebuilding our North Carolina Democratic Party and reforming it would tell you that it is our organizations, bigger than any one single candidate, that are charged with doing the hard work year in, year out of organizing people outside of election cycles. Our staff, our amazing voter protection program, Kat Lawson's leadership, our organizing team that got us the 734 votes, working with many of y'all, and then litigated the hell out of the Riggs case in court, that took building the best team in the country for a Democratic Party. And we faced some very tough times in having to finance the Riggs litigation through a lot of sweat on our end, right? To the tune of $2.2 million because the DNC did not have direct money for us. We need as many people as possible to sign up to be recurring donors for this party monthly. Small dollar is fine. We appreciate it all. It helps us plan. We are trying to further grow our organizing, our voter protection, our judicial efforts. Knowing that we have a certain amount of resources coming in every month is critical to our planning as the second or third largest party in this country. All right. So those are the calls to action. Last thing I'll say, November 16th, one thing that you will hear unequivocally is that going forward, we all need to be in the position of talking directly to voters, where we're at, about why the courts matter, and about this plan to retake our courts and democracy. You will be asked to sign up for canvassing shifts in the cold of January. You will be able to do that where you're at, and we will equip you with the tools that you need to make this stuff social and sustainable, because we need everyone in it for the long haul and not the short term, because our way out of this mess, it requires endurance and it requires patience. So thank you everyone who's been patient with me and with us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things back over to our amazing chair, Chair Anderson Clayton.
Thank you, Jonah Garson. So for folks that may have missed it, right? Our plan right now is that we are going to be litigating, which we have, and we have filed our lawsuits. We are also going to be on the ground, Because as we know, we do not have the ability, our governor in North Carolina does not have the ability to veto redistricting legislation by our state constitution. And so we know right now that these maps are going to take place because the Republican courts that are dominated right now are going to slow walk these lawsuits. That's reality for us. The other side of reality, though, is that Don Davis is still going to put up a hell of a fight in Eastern North Carolina, and we are going to contest every single one of these congressional districts in the state. So if you all are looking for what else can I do right now, find your local Democrat that's running for Congress in your community. Ask them how you can help their campaign. And someone that has stepped up to run for Congress in her community that's also sits on the NCDP board is our second vice chair, Dr. Kimberly Hardy. So I'm going to bring her up here to talk to you all a little bit more about the importance of sticking with congressional candidates right now and also looking to your backyard to make the difference in this fight that we have, because neighbor to neighbor is how we're going to come back in these elections. Dr. Hardy, up to you.
Thanks, Anderson. I very much appreciate it. And all of the speakers who have spoken today have said the loud part out loud, that this is an intentional racial gerrymander. All this is about is trying to take the little bit of power that the Republicans have right now and doing the wrong thing with it. And they have to cheat in order to win because they know that their policies do not favor even their own base. And if given the choice, I know that the folks on the right side of the aisle who genuinely believe in democracy and fairness and representation and having the people pick who they want to represent them, I guarantee you these maps wouldn't look this way. And so we have an opportunity here to go out and knock on doors and talk to our neighbors. And I know that some folks have asked in the chat, like, why more canvassing? When I ran for office in the state legislature in 2020, I went out and knocked on people's doors, and they said that no one had knocked on their doors ever, and they were 44 years old. People feel seen and heard and cared about when we show up on their doors. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. People who get disenfranchised by the process or who feel like their voices really don't matter, they don't get talked to as frequently. This gives us an opportunity to go into those communities and let folks know exactly what's happening, why they're trying to do this, and how they can fight back. One thing that Justice Earls likes to say is the one thing that beats a bad gerrymander is good voter turnout. And people are not just going to turn out of their own free will if they feel like the process isn't working for them. And so, yes, it is important to go out and knock on doors. And yes, it is important to understand the historic path that got us here and how long ago that wasn't. You heard Congressman Butterfield say that it was literacy tests in 1965. I was born in 1971. That is how far back this isn't. That's how long ago this wasn't, and how close we are to losing something that we only just recently got. Black folks feel like their voices do not matter. And when we let Republicans get away with cheating, it reinforces that. And so what I'm asking all of you to do today is to heed what Jonah has said in terms of the very discrete actions that you can take to help us flip these seats. It is not going to be quick. It is an unsatisfying answer to say that we have to wait until 2026 to see the fruit of that labor. But the labor starts today. And it is important to understand the historical precedent that got us here, so we know that we have been in this space before, we have won before, and we can win again. The last thing I want to say before I turn it back over to Anderson is that while there may only be a handful of officers for NCDP, every single person on this Zoom is NCDP. And so if there is something that you know needs to be done in your community, please know we empower you to go and do that. We empower you to go and talk to those neighbors. We empower you to put your name on the ballot just like I'm doing right now. We empower you to support candidates, to register voters before that becomes illegal in this state too. So there are a lot of things you can do. There are things that the party is doing as a whole, and we invite you into that space. And we also encourage you to do what you know works best in your communities to pull people in. Because right now, more than anything, the Democratic Party has to be united against tyranny, and we cannot cave to this authoritarianism. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for caring enough about this process to take part of your night out to join us. And we really do look forward to seeing you on those doors and on the Zooms that we have coming up. With that, I'll pass it back over to our fearless leader, Chair Anderson Clayton.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. And as Dr. Hardy said, one of the most important things that you can do, if you're feeling discouraged right now, I challenge each and every single one of you to get out and knock a door in your local municipal elections. North Carolina Dems have knocked 300,000 doors this year. That is twice as much as we knocked 2 years ago. And we know that it is going to impact in these municipal races so that you all, when you're looking at national Republican policies that are coming in, our frontline levels of defenses in a lot of places are going to be these local level races. And I understand as someone from Person County, North Carolina, a rural part of this state, that a lot of my rural Democrats that are on here tonight are saying, Anderson, we may not have that chance in our communities. There are issues everywhere in our state right now that are impacting our communities. So I hope that if it is a food bank, if it is hunger or housing or a relief effort, that you all in your backyard also can help your county party start and get involved in. The ideas here tonight are not the only ones. They are the ones, though, that are the most immediate and the most important at this moment in time for the state party to showcase to you all about the work that we're doing on the ground. But my county parties out there are doing the work each and every day. My precinct officers are doing this work each and every day. And so if you all want to get involved with your local backyard, I encourage you all to go to the NCDP website. All of our county parties are listed on there so that you can get connected with them. You can email me or Jonah or Kim or Elijah, any of the staff members on this call, and we're happy to get you connected with your county party too, or your local precinct. And also try to make sure that you're connected with the other efforts the state party is doing with around voter protection and the other ways that we can utilize your skills. Because I know that some people are going to look at us and say, I don't want to knock doors and I don't want to make phone calls. Great. Tell me what your job is, and the North Carolina Dems are going to find a way to fit you into this system somewhere, because we need your help. And I hope that tonight you all gather the fact that we're trying to be as creative and scrappy as we can on the ground, because North Carolina can make it out of this. And I know that folks in the chat box have said, Anderson, we're talking about 28, but what about 26? North Carolina is going to be the only state that has the most competitive U.S. Senate election in 2026 with Governor Roy Cooper. But we're also the only state in the country that has 2 red to blue Senate flips in 26 and in 28. And in 28, North Carolina has 22 statewide races on the ballot. We have made it in the South right now to see where we are as a state. What we determine and what we decide to be in the future is up to us and the amount of work that we're willing to put into North Carolina now. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm willing to put in everything that I have for it. And I know the people on this call are willing to. So I hope that you will get involved with us. You will take action. And if this call was not what you needed it to be tonight, because I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the chat box. Jonah Garson goes through our Mobilize. So please give us feedback after this call. We want to make sure that these calls are fruitful for you all and that we're doing them in a way that brings people in. And so also give us your feedback, your thoughts, your ideas, and your creativity for how do we make this party more of what you also want to see involved with it. But the number one thing that I ask y'all to do is stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful, because the number one thing that Republicans are doing to us right now is trying to kill that hope. And the minute you let that happen is the minute that you let them win. So don't let them win, y'all. Let's make sure that we get out there and fight like hell. Thank you for being on this call tonight. And thank you to our staff members for putting it together. I deeply appreciate each and every single one of you. And I promise we'll be following up with all of the links here in a wrap-up email for you all after this tonight too. Thank you all so much for being on. We deeply appreciate it.